Okay, well, I think we'll start now, and just want to say hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Nicola Murphy, Chair of the Energy Institute Northern Ireland branch, and I'll be emceeing our proceedings today. Before we start the presentation, a recorded version of this webinar will be available. And of course, we would love to hear from you, so please post any questions to all panelists in the chat function. And we will endeavour to answer as many questions as possible after all the speakers have delivered their presentations. And if anyone would like to tweet about the webinar, please do so using the hashtag #DeliveringNetZeroNI. You should be able to see that on the screen now. So this is an annual event that the Northern Ireland Energy Institute holds every year with the jointly with the Utility Regulator. And we are really pleased that we can go ahead with it this year, albeit online. We're expecting around 150 attendees, so from all over the world. We've got people from Malaysia, Canada, London, Aberdeen, and Waterford, all over Northern Ireland, Scotland, and England joining today, so you're all very welcome. So again, this is our webinar today on delivering net zero for Northern Ireland, and without much further ado, I would like to introduce John French. John recently joined the Northern Ireland Utility Regulator in November as Chief Executive. Prior to that, John was the Chief Executive of the Consumer Council in Northern Ireland and has previously held senior positions within the Northern Ireland and European energy sector, including Network Director at the Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Partnership in Vienna and as a diplomatic policy advisor on climate change and energy issues within the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. John, over to you.
Good morning, and thank you, Nicola. Good morning, everyone. I would like to welcome you on behalf of the Utility Regulator to this webinar this morning. It's great to see around, as Nicola said, around 150 people registered for this event from so many different organisations and different backgrounds. So hopefully that will add to the wealth of the discussion later on. This is the third annual event that the Utility Regulator has worked with the Energy Institute with, and I'm really grateful for their support and assistance over those events and organising the event today. The Utility Regulator's collaboration with the Energy Institute is designed to provide opportunities and a platform for us all to discuss today's and tomorrow's strategic energy issues. And the theme of today's webinar couldn't be more topical or timely. As everyone knows, in June 2019, the UK Parliament passed legislation that required the UK government to reduce UK net emissions of greenhouse gases by 100% relative to 1990 levels by 2050. And on the 18th of November last year, the Prime Minister set out a 10-point plan for the green industrial revolution, and followed up that by announcing new targets to reduce the UK emissions by at least 68% by 2030 compared to 1990 levels. Locally, we've seen in Northern Ireland our Economy Minister, Diane Dodds, identifying the potential here for the green economy and an ambitious renewable target, which should not be below 70%. More broadly, the Utility Regulator is working actively and positively with the Department of the Economy to help them bring forward their new energy strategy. And Thomas Byrne will be speaking about that later. Tackling climate change is probably one of the world's biggest challenges, if not the biggest challenge we're facing today. Making tangible reductions in greenhouse emissions, understanding the energy framework and the infrastructure that will be needed going forward, recognising the overall costs and both those to consumers, and how we can increase the levels of trust, cooperation and collaboration amongst us all will be key to achieving that net zero target. As economic regulator of the electricity and gas industries in Northern Ireland, we are committed to enabling the energy transition to net zero and working to build trust and collaboration needed throughout the sector. I don't think it is a coincidence that the first chapter of the UK's government's energy white paper that was issued last year focused on consumers. It is clear that consumers need to be at the centre of any energy transition to net zero. And that fairness for consumers, protecting the needs of the most vulnerable and providing opportunities to positively impact on energy bills are key to delivering a consumer-focused net zero future. And this is something that Tanya Hedley will be saying more about during this morning's programme. The Utility Regulator want to be actively part of this and support a low-carbon future which delivers from everyone. So I look forward to listening to the contributions from the speakers this morning, and I have no doubt there'll be no shortage of debate or discussion. So thanks very much. Good morning, and I hand over to Nicola again from the Energy Institute to oversee this morning's programme. Thanks very much.
Thank you, John. It's a great little intro to put everything, set the scene. So our first speaker today is Thomas Byrne, and Thomas is the Director of the Energy Strategy in the Department for the Economy in Northern Ireland. He has worked in energy since 2018 with a particular focus on energy efficiency and renewable electricity. And Thomas has over 15 years broader experience in economic development matters. And I just want to emphasise, we've just had a few little comments there, that if you do want to pose a question to any of the panellists, if you just select in chat all panellists, and then we will answer those questions at the end. But over to you, Thomas. Thank you.
Right. Sorry, I think I'm muted now. There we go. The good old joys of Zoom and WebEx. You're on mute. It's the phrase of 2020. We'll just say, listen, thank you very much for having me along today and for your introduction, Nicola. It's really good that we're able to have this event. And I was there, I think it was 2 years ago in Ravenhill when we held the annual event. So it's a shame we're not able to get together and do that again, but I think we've got the next best thing. And I really do appreciate the opportunity to talk today a bit about Northern Ireland's energy strategy and where we are on the development of that. I'd like to start, I guess, with a bit of context around it. The last energy strategy for Northern Ireland was published in 2010, and it was very much an energy strategy. It was about renewable electricity. It was about electricity markets and interconnectors. It was about energy efficiency and renewable heat. But the environment has changed. The context has changed significantly since then. We've, of course, seen the UK become the first major economy to pass net zero emissions law by 2050. We've seen a new decade, new approach include a commitment to addressing climate change and a new energy strategy. We've seen the Assembly declare climate emergency. DERA, our Department for Agriculture, recently published a discussion document on a climate change bill for Northern Ireland, which of course includes energy. We've seen the Committee for Climate Change publishing its sixth carbon budget just back in December, looking at various pathways to meeting net zero. And also the Bayes Energy White Paper was published just a few weeks ago, setting out the broader UK ambition in this space. So energy is a real strategic, important part of this broader context now. Has a huge part to play in climate change. It also has a huge part to play in growing the economy, in tailoring skills, and in various other aspects of our key strategic priorities as well. So there's an awful lot of importance and priority in terms of what we're doing here on the energy sector to deliver for climate change. But the first stage in our process of developing the energy strategy was a call for evidence, really going out to the outside world, asking a number of strategic questions and inviting comments, input, evidence, research, whatever people had, to help shape this. We received a fantastic response, 161 different responses received, and on our website, they are published along with a summary report of what we received. I'm really delighted as well to see the reach of the input to this, and this reflects the comment I had before. Of the 161 responses, around 60 that were from the energy sector. That means more weren't from the energy sector, and that reflects how important this strategy is for consumers, for various different stakeholders, for individuals across government. So we got a really good, broad, representative range of views into that, and that's helped to shape that broader energy strategy that we're developing at the moment. And I'd just like to thank everyone who input and contributed to that. We're really trying to take a collaborative approach in developing this because we in DFE can't do this alone. Government can't do this alone. So we've set up a government stakeholders group, first of all, to provide leadership across the executive, bringing together the key departments in central government and local government, alongside, of course, the Utility Regulator and the Consumer Council, to help shape the future here in the energy strategy. We have 5 working groups looking at some of the key issues and policy options in the areas of consumers, energy efficiency, heat, power and transport. Those groups are looking at the evidence provided through the call for evidence. They're carrying out research. They're drawing on the expertise available from within it. And ultimately, their outcome is to provide evidence-based options for consideration by the department and by our minister. And the membership of those groups covers not just government, but also industry and other key stakeholders where appropriate. There's more than 70 members across 30 different organisations working on those policy options. So I think it really shows the collaborative approach that's being taken, that we've got such a broad network of people involved in developing, delivering and impacted by energy policy working on these options together. So I've included a graphic on screen of the broad timeline. As I mentioned, the call for evidence was carried out, closed in April, and a summary report published. Now, the next key milestone in the development of the energy strategy is an options consultation, which will go out at the end of March. But we didn't want to disappear in June for 9 months to go away and work on this, so we come up with an approach which was about publishing monthly bulletins that would set out a number of the key issues that we're looking at, some of the evidence that we've received, and some of the key areas we're looking at developing policy options in relation to. So hopefully a number of you are signed up for that and have been able to keep up to date on what we're looking at. If you haven't, you can go on our website, you can read those that have been published to date, and you can sign up to the mailing list. And it's a great way just to keep on top of what we're doing on energy strategy. So as I mentioned, the next key stage in it is an options consultation in March, published by a new energy strategy towards the end of 2021. But I think one key point I do want to make is there's no end date for an energy strategy. There's no such thing as a final strategy. The fact is, whatever we publish and whenever we publish it has to be a living, breathing document that is always reviewed, is always monitored, and is always tailored and shaped to what's happening around us. This is an ongoing process, and certainly, what we publish in March and then later this year will be clear directions of travel, policy direction, targets, things like that. But it's not the end. It's actually the start of our journey over the next 30 years in the energy sector. Just to cover a few key issues, I guess, that we're looking at within it. I mean, the big area of success we've had over the last number of years has been in renewable electricity, where we've taken a power sector that was originally based on around 3% of renewables and taken it to a position where it's at 48% in June 2020. I mean, that's a fantastic achievement, and it shows what good policy and collaborative working across government and with industry can deliver. That's a good example of the success we've had. We really need to build on that as we take forward the future energy policy in the energy strategy. But we do have to be clear that actually power is a relatively small part of the energy mix. So it's 16% of our total final energy consumption. And transport and heat are actually, really important areas that need to be tackled through the energy strategy. Indeed, when we look at a breakdown of greenhouse gas emissions by sector, we see that energy-related sectors account for 66% of total emissions. So that's why the energy strategy, that's why energy policy is so important for net zero, because ultimately an awful lot of the heavy lifting will be done by the energy sector. I'd like to just talk very briefly about trends in emissions since 1990, because that's obviously a key overarching thing driving the strategy. We have had success in Northern Ireland. We've seen a 20% decrease in emissions from 1990. However, from where we are now in 2020, we need a further 82% decrease in greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. That's an increase in the rate of decrease of four times what we've had in the past. And that really gives a clear signal as to the scale of work, the scale of change needed to deliver on that. And that's why what we come forward within a future energy strategy and future energy policy, it has to be transformational. It has to be ambitious, because otherwise we simply won't contribute to net zero by then. We have had success, as I mentioned, in the power sector in decarbonising that, moving away from a power sector that was mainly based on coal to a power sector that's based on gas and renewables. But as I mentioned, certainly heat, particularly in the domestic sector, and transport have been really stubborn sectors to tackle and will be a really important part of any future energy strategy for net zero. Now, this is a really important issue for us as we do it. If budgets were unlimited, this would be a much easier challenge for us to do, but we have to balance the need for investment, the need for the expectation that costs will come from it, with the needs of consumers and taxpayers. I would like to make one point that, costs, particularly when we talk about fossil fuels, that is a cost. The fact is, we buy fossil fuels, we import it, damages our environment, it provides the energy, and it's gone. It's simply a cost to Northern Ireland. However, things like renewables, things like energy efficiency, they're investments, they're actual assets that we can draw from to create our energy. And that's what a lot of the future energy system is going to be about. It's going to be about investing in things and trying to come up with the most cost-effective way to do that going forward. I've included a couple of slides on screen to give an overview of our current consumer base in electricity. which we can see is obviously very, very focused, mostly domestic connections, but in terms of the actual consumption, very much the non-domestic side. So we have to keep our consumers very much to the fore on this. And that's why when we're looking at policy options, we're looking at what are the potential options, what are the potential technologies, what seem to be the most cost effective. We're looking at when you bring these things forward, when they might be cost effective. Is it right to invest now, or is it right to wait some period of time? But also, who pays? Is it consumers? How does it fall on taxpayers, for example? What's the role of the private sector in this? So there is a big strategic question around everything we look at in the energy strategy around who pays and where that sits. And I think we have to be really aware of something like fuel poverty as we do this. We have had success in recent years at bringing fuel poverty down. Energy is only one of a number of factors that contribute to that. But if we choose an energy transition, if we choose policy options that increase costs for consumers, we risk increases in fuel poverty. That table there on screen is an interesting piece of research that the Housing Executive referred to, which showed that if energy costs increase in various areas, the impact that might have on fuel poverty, which obviously is not something we want to do. However, it also shows if we can do the energy transition in a cost-effective way that brings down costs for consumers, we can help to contribute to reductions in fuel poverty. And it's also about the economy. It's about a green economy. Northern Ireland has a low carbon and renewable economy of around 3,500 businesses, over £1 billion of turnover, and almost 5,500 employees. But it can be more than that. And that's what we want to grow through the energy strategy. We want this not just to be about net zero and about costs. We want this to be about the economy and how we can use it as a stimulus and a driver for the green economy. And as we can see from the UK low carbon economy, there's going to be opportunities for every sector: manufacturing, services, construction, utilities. It's all there, and we want to take advantage of that as best possible. I'm not going to go through any of the detail of this, but if you have a look at our e-bulletins, you'll get a readout of some of the key themes that we're looking in within some of those key areas of power, heat, transport, consumers, and energy efficiency. It's fascinating topics here, real big challenges in every single one of them, and they'll all be included in the options consultation that will come out at the end of March. So hopefully that has given you a bit of an overview on some of the strategic issues that sets the scene for the rest of today's session. As I mentioned, if you want to go on our website, if you want to sign up to the mailing list, you'll be kept in touch on reports that we publish on the e-bulletins and research that flows from the energy strategy. And I really look forward to having engagement in the upcoming options consultation, getting a chance to speak to you further then, and hopefully you will contribute to it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Thomas. That's great. Lots of food for thought there, and I see some questions coming in, so please continue to submit your questions. Our next speaker today is Tanya Hedley. Tanya is the Director of Networks at the Utility Regulator, and she's responsible for the regulation of electricity, water and gas networks in Northern Ireland. Prior to joining the Utility Regulator, Tanya worked for Northern Ireland Electricity for over 18 years in transmission development, asset management and environmental management. Having completed a degree in electrical and electronic engineering, she gained chartered engineer status, and she is also a fellow of the Institute of Engineering and Technology and an associated member of the Institute of Environmental Management and Assessment. So thank you so much, Tanya, for speaking today, and it's over to you now. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to start by thanking Thomas for his presentation. I noted that when he put up his picture of the bulletin, he didn't do the one with his Santa hat on, which I particularly liked. So, Thomas, your presentation obviously shows the commitment and the extensive work that you and your team are putting into the new energy strategy. This strategy will impact on much of the work carried out by the UR, and we will continue to engage and support the work that the department is doing. I want to draw on two quotes from the AFA to highlight the central focus of my contribution this morning. One, ultimately the energy transition should be focused on benefiting energy consumers, domestic and non-domestic. And their other quote is, there will need to be protections to ensure consumers are not left behind. I'm going to talk briefly on two things: the challenges we are facing in the UR on the delivery of net zero, and how we make sure that energy consumers are at the centre of the journey to net zero. There are many issues that are currently under consideration. However, there is a balance to be struck between delivery and regulatory challenge. On delivery, for infrastructure, getting the fundamental rights are key. We're in a cycle of major energy network price controls with hundreds of millions of pounds of investment that will make a major impact in delivering the energy transition. The UR have approved an investment of $3.6 billion for networks over the past 10 years, with some of this leading to the 48% renewable generation that Thomas highlighted. I would also like to flag the importance of delivering the North-South Interconnector as we continue to work with NI Networks and Sony to ensure this happens. Transparency is important. Our price control reviews bring the kind of transparency to the table that is needed, and we need to see this clarity on costs and outcomes. This is, for instance, the key to the work we've been doing through Sony price control and the evaluative framework, which I'll expand on later. Innovation and new technologies are happening now. It's a time of change, and as regulators, we recognise that this energy revolution will bring forward new approaches, harnessing the power of cutting-edge and disruptive technologies that will change everything. We're up for this, and we want to be an enabler of change. The pace of change is also an issue, and while we recognise that technology may sometimes outpace, we hope to apply the necessary flexibility where there is a clear need and a value proposition to bring to the table. Regulators don't choose winners in terms of technologies and solutions to meet the zero emissions, and the pace of change of getting to net zero means we have to keep up. We need to be facilitating and enabling this change, but always being mindful of protecting the interests of consumers. Under regulatory issues, it's already clear that the extent to which we can facilitate innovation and apply flexibility is constrained by our current varies. For example, the decarbonisation of heat is a huge challenge, and Thomas acknowledged this. We regulate gas and electricity network costs. We don't regulate the provision of heat. So who should pay for the cost of heat networks? Should this impact the bills of electricity and gas consumers? Clearly, there's an opportunity to review our varies to ensure our regulatory role enables the energy transition. We acknowledge that any legislative change is an issue for DfE to consider and will take time. In the meantime, we are prudently supporting a number of projects to help facilitate the new energy transition. For instance, we'll be developing new licence conditions on both NI networks and Sony this year to ensure they provide a digitalisation strategy for NI electricity network and open access to the data associated with this network to allow increased innovation. This will help provide an integrated and flexible system. We want high quality service. We want an open, flexible and collaborative approach to the consideration of new ideas and technologies that could have the potential to support the energy transition process. We've also been working with gas TSOs and DNOs on biomethane injection, engaging with developers, and hope to have an open workshop in a few months for anyone interested in this area. Risks should be carried by those who are able to manage them. Companies are paid to manage risk, and they must not pass on these risks to consumers where it is not appropriate. Protection for consumers should only be removed with clear evidence that this is also adding value for consumers in, for example, reducing the costs. When it comes to costs, we need to see the value and delivery for consumers. Evidence of value is essential with clear explanation of what is being delivered. As mentioned before, affordability is something else that needs to be considered. If we want consumers to reduce their carbon footprint by using more electricity, should these costs be added to electricity bills? And we need to put consumers at the centre and make this part of how energy companies deliver the energy transition. An example of this is we've recently introduced a performance framework to promote high levels of performance by Sony and deliver whole system outcomes that add value for consumers. We've championed consumer engagement and are working with all network companies through a number of fora to ensure this is a critical part of the price control review process. We now expect distribution network companies to engage with their consumers and seek information on their needs and expectations. Consumers are paying and they require these services. It is important that put consumers in control, communicate with them and listen to them. There needs to be protection. They're not obliged to engage and do what companies want, and they need to be protected. This needs to be our consideration from the beginning, especially for the vulnerable. Our Consumer Best Practice project will be considering these protection needs. Enable all consumers to choose from a balanced range of products and services. Companies need consumer data to drive change and add value, However, this data needs to be protected. Empower, enable and protect consumers. Do not assume positive outcomes. The UR wants to see evidence on how consumer money adds value for them. Ensure information provided for consumers is transparent and accessible. It needs to be easily understood. This year's consumers face new issues and much work has been done behind the scenes to ensure service is continued. However, more visible work has also taken place. Regulated gas companies banded together to create a joint website and one point of contact for consumers impacted by COVID. This type of joint working will be essential going forward. So in summary, and to make clear the point, that there is no doubt investment will be needed to reach our net zero target. And consumers are key stakeholders in the low carbon future. Consumers will have to pay, but they will need to be engaged and involved in this journey to net zero. Modelling has been carried out to date, showing a significant increase in electricity demand with electric cars and heating in the future. We need people to reduce their carbon footprint, but we must guard against putting all the costs on electricity bills. We need a transition to net zero that involves them, not confounds them with jargon. In closing, I'll leave you with this. To make the transition consumer-centric, we need to think about 3 E's. The need to engage consumers in the road to net zero. We need to make sure they're enabled, and they are and feel part of this process. In doing this, we deliver the biggest benefit of them all. We will empower consumers, making them avail of the opportunities that the road to net zero can bring, and driving the kind of behaviour that will impact positively on delivering a low carbon future. Engage, enable, empower. As a regulator, we are ambitious for net zero and want to play our part in delivering this. We want that ambition to be there for consumers too. Putting them at the centre will help us make this happen. Working together, we can do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. It's very interesting, and we've got our 3 E's, and we'll be aware of that and with any of our engagement with the utility regulator and thinking about consumers at the heart, which is excellent. Our next speaker today is Professor Mark Gillan, and Mark is going to talk to us about present on attracting world-class low-carbon industries. Just a little bit of background for those of you that don't know Mark. Mark is the Chief Operations Officer at Artemis Technologies Ltd, as well as the Strength in Places Programme Director for the Belfast Maritime Consortium. And just a little bit on the Belfast Maritime Consortium. Their aim is to decarbonise maritime transportation through the development of transformative zero emissions ferries in Belfast. Mark started his career in aerospace before spending 15 years in various engineering leadership roles within Formula One, most recently as head of the race team at Williams F1. Prior to joining Artemis Technologies, Mark was CTO of Innovate UK, responsible for both the strategy and impact and centres and networks governance directorates, overseeing an annual funding portfolio of over £250 million. So, Mark, we look forward to seeing your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicola. And I'm delighted to be invited over the next 15 minutes to give you a short presentation on basically what Artemis and the consortium, the Belfast Maritime Consortium, are doing, looking at decarbonising maritime transportation. I'd like to end with a few sort of takeaway points of just my experience at both Artemis, but also as Chief Technology Officer at Innovate UK, where I was there until September of last year, and really just to end up with a few sort of key points of what businesses maybe should be thinking of during this journey. So you see on the screen a very calm sea state in Belfast Harbour, a very rare day probably, but I'll show you a slightly more sort of high sea state at the end of the presentation. But this is a sort of a mock-up of the vessel that we're looking to demonstrate a zero emissions water taxi service here in Northern Ireland before we look sort of wider afield for world sales on this type of vessel. So always starting with a sort of problem statement. I think it's been mentioned already, the sort of importance and impact of transportation on greenhouse gases. And if we look at maritime as a specific sector, the transportation side of maritime emits round about just under 1,000 million tonnes of carbon dioxide annually, and is responsible for just under 2.5% of global greenhouse gases. So it's a significant impact in sort of world emissions. The International Maritime Organization, which is actually based in London, headquartered in London, just opposite Houses of Parliament, is looking to cut its emissions by 50% by 2050, which is a significant reduction, given that if things continue on the same trajectory in maritime, we would look to increase emissions between 50 to 250%, depending on the models that are in works at the moment. So something significant has to change in the industry. And I've been fortunate to, in my career, to be involved in both aerospace, automotive and maritime. And I would say that automotive probably has driven the emissions harder than any of the transportation sectors, and very much in maritime we're playing catch up. And I just use one particular quote from Sir David King, who was the ex-chief scientific advisor, and this was a couple of years ago, that time is no longer on our side, and that we need immediate coordinated action to move to this net zero economy by 2050. And that coordinated piece, I think, is really, really important. So what we're doing in Belfast, just to give you an example, so Artemis are leading a consortium of 13 partners. And this consortium was put together intentionally to include large companies such as what was Bombardier, is now transitioned to Spirit Aerosystems, smaller companies such as Creative Composites and ourselves, local councils, both Belfast and Ards, North Down, the Harbour, the college, Belfast Met College for the skills piece, the universities for the research, both Queen's and Ulster, Invest NI, and Energia on the grid supply side, and both Catalyst and NIA. So it's a real collection of large companies, small companies, local councils, and research technology organisations to help drive this programme. And we have a 41-month programme to develop a transformative zero emissions water taxi service and demonstrate that, as I say, between Bangor and Belfast as a route in a 41-month programme. It's a £53 million programme, of which 33 million is coming from UKRI Strengthened Places. We were fortunate enough to be successful at one of the 7 successful Strengthened Places dotted around the UK. And obviously we're bringing in just over 20 million of co-investment. So it's significant co-investment. In terms of the technology, we're combining what was America's Cup technology, or is America's Cup technology. Artemis Technology has been formed from Artemis Racing and have competed in the America's Cup, the sailing competition. And we're bringing in just under $250 million of investment in terms of technology and skill set in hydrofoiling over the last 10 years. So it's significant. And we're combining hydrofoiling, which, if you can see where my cursor is, just looks like a wing with control surfaces. And we're inputting within the wing a Formula One energy recovery system. So we're combining Formula One with America's Cup technology, working with our consortium partners on the knowledge that is being generated within Northern Ireland, particularly around composites. And you can see a number of the companies and the universities are obviously sort of specialists in that area to create something truly transformative. So in terms of actual sort of technology, it's not just the hydrofoiling. We're also autonomously controlling these vessels. So just like an aircraft where the pilot puts in an input, doesn't actually manually control the plane itself, we're doing that on the vessel itself. And in terms of technology benefits, it's not just enough to have a zero emissions vessel or vehicle. You want to actually bring something added benefit to the consumer. So we have the zero emissions, which is great, obviously, for hitting the net zero target. But also the vessel has some other benefits. So there's no wake to the vessel. And you may think, well, that maybe not that important. But for those with long memories in Northern Ireland, I remember the HSS that used to go out of the harbour, and there was a wake issue on that particular vessel. And just like Concorde couldn't use its sort of full speed until it was out of land reach, this vessel, because we fly the vessel above the waves, has zero wake. It also, because it's flying over the wake, has extreme ride comfort. So seasickness should be a thing of the past. And it is also very scalable between 500 and 400 passengers and autonomously controlled. To do that, we use a very, very sort of complicated arrangement of simulation and simulators. And we're bringing and have brought our sort of world-class simulator, which you see in the sort of bottom right, full motion platform, human in the loop simulator with hardware in the loop real time to Belfast, to Northern Ireland. And this is at the heart of our development process of the consortium. And this is actually what we'll be using to tune and optimize the actual vessel. So it's a mixture of digital twin design, composite engineering, hydrofoiling, energy recovery, and it's all going together to drive this program. And just to finish, just to take a few takeaways, and this, as I mentioned, has been sort of on the back of not just my Artemis sort of experience, but at Innovate UK. If I was to list a few of the key points that we should be looking at, and Northern Ireland should be looking at, is that we need to be looking at bold asks. So we want to really move the dial. We need to be a strong collective voice. We need to collaborate. It's no good just working business to business. I mean, we need to work with national, local government, so the devolved and central government, SMEs, large companies, universities, not just a university, colleges and the research technology organisations, and looking to expand across into the whole of the UK and wider afield. I'd say you want to play to our unique strengths and capabilities, and with that transformative vision. So again, we want to actually, it's no good just obviously going to net zero, but we also want to be driving certain added advantages to the consumer. And then also looking to play to the strengths of the region, geographical strengths and the logistics. Northern Ireland, actually, we looked at a number of places in the UK to site our venture, and Northern Ireland came up trumps purely because Deepwater Port has a airport right beside the port, has the universities and the local infrastructure, businesses and skill sets within a 20-mile radius of where we want to put in, and that's really difficult to find. So I think we need to play to our strengths. And then the final piece, obviously, is in the skills journey. There's no point trying to build this sort of transformative business if we don't have the cohort of staff and generating the technicians, the postdocs, etc., a range of skill sets. And then the last point I would say, just in closing, is along this journey, thinking right at the beginning of bringing the venture capitalists and the investors along the journey. Again, these things are sort of expensive commitments, and we obviously need to bring that investment community along the journey with us as we look into new sectors.
That's great, Mark. Thank you. So that's a really interesting presentation, and really great to see what's actually happening here in Northern Ireland, and hopefully within the next couple of years we'll be able to do some of the trial runs from Belfast to Bangor before it'll be going all over the place, but that'll be absolutely amazing, Mark. So our next speaker in the Making Net Zero Happen session is Professor Jan Webb, and Jan's going to be talking about the UK policy and practice for sustainable heat and low energy buildings. Just a little bit of a background on Jan. I've really had to, there's just so much that Jan's involved in, so this is a real little snapshot here. Jan Webb is the Professor of Sociology of Organisations at Edinburgh University. Her research concerns energy, climate change and society with a focus on comparative European policy and practice for sustainable heat and low energy buildings. She leads the Heat and the City Research Group and has a working knowledge of local energy initiatives across the UK. She co-convenes a network of leading-edge local authorities plus government officials, ESCOs and expert practitioners. Her research contributes to policy. She is expert advisor to the Scottish Government on fuel poverty, energy strategy and climate change plans. And she's also a member of the UK Government BES Social Research Evaluation Group. And I first met Jan, I think it was just over 8 years ago when I was working on a project evaluating the potential for a district heating system based on geothermal energy in the Harryville estate in Ballymena, which is a real hotspot for geothermal energy when I was working at Action Renewables. So anyway, less about that and over to you now, Jan. So looking forward to hearing your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Nicola, and thank you for the invitation to take part. It's really interesting to hear the perspectives of people on the net zero goals in relation to Northern Ireland. I seem to spend quite a lot of time talking about those goals in the Scottish context, so hopefully we'll try and draw a few comparisons. So why focus on energy for heat to start with? Well, because it is a big challenge. It's essential, as we've seen from previous speakers, to that net zero carbon emissions goal. And yet, 10 years on from the UK's first Climate Change Act, or more than 10 years now, really we haven't got anywhere towards the decarbonisation of heat. Mainly what we use for heating sources are fossil fuels, of course, in Northern Ireland, particularly dominant heat supply and more recent development of the gas network. Whereas in Britain, in England, Scotland, Wales, we are much more wedded, one might say, to the gas grid. And in some ways, that is part of the difficulty. What happens to the future of the gas grid? And as I'm aware, Northern Ireland facing the same questions. We're also, in Europe, generally, the UK, all parts of the UK, lag, in the wrong sense, lag well behind other European countries in terms of the share of energy from renewable sources for heating and cooling, as that figure there shows. We're well down at the bottom of the pack, I'm afraid. So what kind of issue is this? Well, part of the reason for the lack of progress, undoubtedly, is because this is a huge challenge. And I just put a quote up there from UK government's 2018 piece on transforming heating. This was a policy paper that looked at summing up and pulling together the evidence. And one of the conclusions from that review was that change of this kind really requires huge coordination beyond the scale of most public policy programs. So it's very understandable that this is extremely difficult territory for policymakers, but it is also critical. And unfortunately, of course, in the way that I'm sure most politicians and most of us, indeed as part of the general population, would appreciate, there isn't a silver bullet. There isn't a nice, neat solution that is easily graspable, obviously going to be cost effective and not have lots of perverse side effects from following through. So trying to avoid the perverse effects, the unintended consequences of any major shifts in heat sources. I've tried to put up on the diagram there a sense of the just absolutely interconnected, seamless, technical, social, cultural, material, economic, political, everything's bound up in there. It's about every building, certainly heat in buildings for heating space and hot water. It's about property owners, the occupants of the buildings, but it's also about the infrastructure of those buildings and the supply of energy to them, whatever energy that is that gets used for heating that space. And of course, there is a considerable issue about industrial use of heat, high temperature heat, currently highly reliant on fossil fuels. Third kind of issue there is the major peakiness of heat use, huge swings from peak to trough, both daily, on a daily routine, but also interseasonally, of course. We're probably at peak demand now in Scotland. I'm looking out onto a very snowy scene outside in my house in Edinburgh. So it's a whole system problem, in other words. It involves so many different aspects of the way we live. Which I would argue, okay, I'm a social scientist, I would make this argument, but I would argue that the research and development agenda is much a societal one as it is a technical one. We have many of the technical components for the solutions. We have established technologies like heat pumps, like district heating networks, like biofuels to some extent, biomass, obviously, and the systems for using that. We know a lot about the technologies, but we're not really directly applying them in sufficient scale and through area-based, I would always argue for area-based, larger scale system demonstrators that bring both the technology, the networks, the people, the businesses together to look at how we manage that transition. Undoubtedly, it will involve some experiments, some failures, and that, of course, very challenging. So that balance of technology innovation versus application and improvement, I think with heat, we can do a lot with the technologies that we have, but really depends a lot on being willing to apply and improve and work at place-based scale with people to make sure that we get the best results from that, and of course to handle the finances. Now I realise I'm posing a lot of hard questions rather than providing any answers, so I thought I would spend just a couple of minutes talking about the model behind the energy efficient Scotland as part of a whole systems thinking. Now, Scotland, interestingly, I think, is in comparison with Northern Ireland, has fewer powers of regulation in the energy sector than Northern Ireland does. And so it has really had to make a virtue out of necessity, if you like, by positioning energy in the context of the powers over economic development, which are devolved to Scotland and certainly are devolved to Northern Ireland as well. And in that sense, perhaps almost inadvertently, the Scottish Government had placed more emphasis on energy demand and the use side of our energy system, not simply the supply side. And one of the results, one of the consequences of that has been to put greater emphasis on energy efficiency, particularly in our existing building stock, and to take what is still, I think, a relatively unusual step of treating the energy efficiency of our built environment as an infrastructure priority. So for the last 5 years, with some debate in Scotland, quite intensive debate, as I can see, is taking shape in Northern Ireland too, around what that means. What does treating energy efficiency as an infrastructure priority mean in terms of the actions that we can take behind that? So this is really, looking at the Energy Efficient Scotland programme, is the first major step to achieving that aim of net zero emissions from all buildings, from the whole building stock in the next 15 to 20 years. That's the goal, big goal. Very much in line with that and aligned with it is the ambition to remove poor energy efficiency as a contributor to fuel poverty. Recognising that it's not the only factor, obviously, the energy efficiency of buildings, not the only factor in fuel poverty, but certainly can be part of the solution to that. So one of the key proposals behind Energy Efficient Scotland is to create a statutory local responsibility for comprehensive area-based heat and energy efficiency planning, to look at every building in an area, in other words, and to think, okay, what's the most effective way forward here? What can we do in, for instance, Inverclyde as opposed to in central Glasgow, as opposed to in Edinburgh or in Haddington or wherever, So how does the strategy need to differ depending on where you live and what the opportunities are in that particular place? But also to look at the potential for making greater use of district heating through new regulation and licensing of district heating. I know that one of your previous speakers referred to the fact that heat is unregulated. To some extent, that has been seen as an opportunity in Scotland to think, okay, how would we regulate heat? What does it mean to regulate heat? Is it something that is devolved by default, which it's often treated as being? So local authorities and social enterprises are really positioned as intermediaries in that model. Also behind it is a proposition to offer mixes of loan and grant funding to every property owner. So those who are considered, like me, are able to pay, able to self-finance, should be able to access low or zero interest loans to upgrade our property. Of course, we need the regulatory push to make everyone do that, including me, and developing a specialist national body to coordinate the work. Really needing to see then, and really taking the opportunity to see energy efficiency as a benefit in the Scottish economy rather than a burden, an opportunity to create new jobs, new skilled work that stays local, that generates value for the local economy, in that sense, a big benefit. So in conclusion, I would say, decarbonising heat, not just in Scotland, but across the UK, is increasingly something that's on the to-do list. It's recognised as a push from the UK Climate Change Committee, but I think we really do need, echoing interestingly Mark's previous comments about Artemis and about low carbon transport in the marine sector, really need to build societally that working consensus about the future direction of heat. That means cross-sector, bringing different parties together, talking particularly about financing and cost-sharing principles with that. Who's going to pay for what? When? To what extent should we be socialising the costs through general taxation, given that there are differential rates of benefit for different groups and different areas of the country here, different places? Critical factor is having trustworthy building bodies. So building trust is part and parcel of creating the sorts of changes in heat systems that we need. And that means we need an independent coordinating and regulatory body, advisory bodies who can stand outside the immediate sector and business interests, so that people will trust that the standards that are being pursued can be guaranteed and that they can have redress if something goes wrong. And I've suggested really that there are two starting points to develop that workable consensus. One is the retrofit of building stock, because it's a no regrets area of action, and the other one is to get those larger scale place-based system demonstrators together. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you so much, Jan. Again, lots of really good discussion points there, and hopefully we'll have a little bit of time to talk about that after. So the last presenter is myself, so I'm just going to present, and I'm aware that we are running a little bit over time, so I will be as fast as I can. If I could ask maybe Robin to just to move on to my slides now. Oh yeah, here we go. Okay, so I'm going to talk about developing skills and training, ensuring a world-class delivery and standards, but it's very much at a high level. So let's just start here. So I'm going to keep it short, and I'm just going to cover really just the current situation, upskilling and training, the just transition, policy support, and I've just got a few recommendations as well. Okay, so I'm not going to cover climate change. I had a little bit in about that, but John French at the very start covered, where we are with that and sort of, why we're going towards this net zero. So that's already done, which is great. There are a few key points that I want to highlight here, though. So first of all, the skills shortage. The government identified a skills gap, and this was in 2018, in particular in building design, construction, and in the installation of new measures such as heat pumps, energy and water efficiency, ventilation and thermal comfort. This skill list is more extensive now, especially if we include energy storage and hydrogen and new types of energy technologies. And even just what all the other presenters have been talking about, the different technologies and even, meeting targets, we need to have the skills and training in place and people to be actual to A, teach this, and B, to actually deliver it and take up these different training courses. And just as an FYI, I thought this was quite interesting. In 2018, approximately 40 to 50% of the occupations from the Home Office's current UK occupation shortage list were related to the energy and utilities sector. So I just wonder what the impact of Brexit will be on that as well. Anyhow, so the next point that I just wanted to bring up as well, and just stating the current situation, is that 27% of the workforce will retire in the next 9 years. So, and then also of that, on top of that, there will be other, people that do need to retrain and reskill, and that's at about 48% in the next 9 years. So it sort of equates to, over 250,000 energy sector workers are either retiring or will need to retrain. A really interesting quote that I got to from the National Grid CEO, Nicola Shaw. She expressed her concerns about the tough competition the energy industry faces for talented young professionals. So just to give you a recent example, more than 40% of physics graduates, and I think this was from last year, preferred to pursue careers in finance, banking and technology, not science and engineering. So I think, Mark from Artemis, if more of these physics graduates saw what you were doing, that they might be a little bit more interested and attracted to come into the sector. But it's about making the sector attractive as well, for graduates and for students, and to encourage them to come into energy rather than to go elsewhere. So I'm just going to talk a little bit now about upskilling and training. So before COVID-19 hit, the CBI and McKinsey, they researched skills gaps over the next decade. They identified that a step change is needed from government and business to increase investment in reskilling. So, for example, investment in adult learning, so an adult learning is age 24 plus, has stagnated over the past decade, and government has underinvested in adult education. So the most recent stat that I got on that was only 2% of the current education spending goes on adult learning. I've stated this as within the oil and gas industry, many will have to upskill or retrain altogether. According to a recent survey, 42.8% of oil and gas workers have been made redundant or furloughed since March 2020. So I just wanted to put this in because we've got a large audience today, even from Scotland too, and we're all impacted by this. As you can imagine, within this sector, there's a high level of concern about employment and job security and a low level of government support. But 81.7% said they would consider moving to a job outside of the sector, and many have transferable skills to move into renewable energy, and just to give some examples, Seb Marine went from building offshore oil rigs to offshore wind substations. Techmar used its lifting and mechanical expertise in the oil and gas sector to start work on subsea cables. Arup carried out a study that identified which potential sectors were suitable for diversification. So offshore wind and decommissioning are straightforward matches, as well as geothermal, district heating, water infrastructure, as well as energy storage, hydrogen, wave and tidal, and nuclear decommissioning. So I think there's a lot that we can do as well, and that's hopefully will start to be worked on in the next year. The good news is that so in November, the government has set out a clear ambition to create 2 million green jobs by 2030. So this was Boris Johnson announced that late last year and launched their new Green Jobs Task Force. So this has been making some progress in England and Scotland. So I know just this month, I think it was last week in Scotland, they announced that they are building nine new renewable energy and energy efficiency training colleges across Scotland. And it's all through this task force, and which aims to focus on the immediate and longer term challenges of delivering skilled workers for the transition to net zero. So, we need to think about how can we be part of that in Northern Ireland and secure funding, from this task force so that we can do similar things here to meet our targets. And then I think it's really important that with the skills and upskilling and training, that it is a just transition. And I think sort of Tanya almost referred to this, always working with the consumer and just, making things, as just as we can. So a just transition is one that will be worker led and that requires workers being willing to make a change. As the energy industry changes, workers will have to upskill or retrain. This is not just an energy problem. And again, looking back at another study by McKinsey in the CBI report, it estimated that in the UK, around 30 million people will need to be reskilled by 2030 in core areas such as digital, teaching and training, and STEM knowledge and critical thinking. Those are the key areas. And then there was a study that completed again of just over 1,300 oil and gas workers surveyed. And in relation to skills and retraining, and 91% said that they'd never heard of a just transition. So we need to move it from academic and from experts in the field using it, into actually letting people know what it means and how to use it to their best advantage. Vulnerable workers and communities need to be protected through a just transition. Again, as the Energy Institute Daniel DeWiz recently referred to in January's edition of Energy World, many of the key skills overlap and can be transferred through upskilling. So attracting more graduates into the energy sector through marketing and positive campaigns, focusing on the road to net zero with attractive salaries and employment packages, increasing gender diversity with more women in engineering and the overall energy sector through continuing STEM initiatives. So currently, of the 100 top energy companies, only 79% of UK energy companies have no women at all in executive board positions. So again, if we attract more women into the sector, then will take on more management and directorship levels, and they will inspire more women and support more women to get into the sector. So my next slide is on policy support. So the UK should initiate a concerted policy and fiscal effort to rapidly build the clean industry to at least the extent that they have supported the oil industry. In line with a just transition, this should enable public participation, for example, the ownership of renewable infrastructure and support for local supply chains. Importantly, the government should support a major scaling up of education and reskilling to support workers who need to move into changed roles or new industries. A detailed assessment of the skills required and any gaps for the clean energy sectors to reach net zero and an allocation of finance and support for upskilling and retraining is necessary. Cross-departmental working groups set up to address training and skills required for the transition in line with working closely with industry and education. So just really have to make sure that any of the policies that are introduced, they are aligned with the overall, with skills and training, and they're aligned with the overall energy policies and strategies. there's no point in saying, okay, let's have 600,000 heat pumps installed every year. Let's say they say this in England, when they don't have enough installers to actually do that, and there's no training courses, or there's not enough training courses to train apprentices, or young people or older people to then go ahead and do this. So really, it's important that policy is supported in this section, in this sector. Sorry. So recommendations. So just really to recap on what I've said, the government should support major scaling up of education and reskilling so that we can meet our 2050 targets. And this would include investing in and supporting businesses to provide their staff with options on upskilling and retraining through subsidising courses and salaries, making green jobs attractive to school pupils and graduates through marketing and STEM campaigns, supporting self-employed. So let's not forget about all the self-employed and consultants that work in the energy sector. How can they be supported to upskill and retrain? And again, I would say it would be through subsidising courses and wages as well. Make it easy to get advice on upskilling and retraining, especially for the adult population. I think it is a little bit more difficult, that if you do want to go ahead and look at training to work in hydrogen, where do you go? What do who gives you advice? Just to make that a little bit easier. Make this a matter of urgency, and I know Mark referred to that as well. Several UK and global studies have shown that a rapid transition to 100% renewable energy is both technically feasible and affordable. The barriers are political. And as I said, in Scotland, they're opening 9 renewable and energy efficiency colleges. In the Republic of Ireland, they're actually opening 4 retrofit skills training hubs. And plan on having 2,000 people trained on an annual basis just on retrofitting to help meet their targets. We need to see more of this. I mean, you think about your own career plan and that of your children and your grandchildren. Talk to them about STEM subjects and working in a clean energy sector and how attractive that can be. So I am just... As Christiana Figueres from the United Nations said, we will move to a low-carbon world because nature will force us, or because policy will guide us. If we wait until nature forces us, the cost will be astronomical. So thank you. So I am just going to just as a close, I'm going to ask my colleague Mark Welsh, who is also we're going to go into our question and answers. So I'm going to ask my colleague, Sam McCluskey, who is the Northern Ireland Honourable Secretary. I'm just going to ask Sam if she would go ahead and facilitate the Q&A, and then we'll do a little close after. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola. And good afternoon, everybody. There's a wide range of questions coming in, so bear with me while I go through them from the start. Thank you very much for your lively participation. I'm going to start with a question that came in that perhaps will be for all of the panelists. It's a question that around the range of renewables that already we're aware of work on the system, and I think the question was that the real issue now is how we encourage efficient expansion and adoption of these technologies, and how does the panel think that we would be the optimum way to do this?
Thanks, Sam. I might maybe throw in a few thoughts and then others can come in after. I think there's really 2 aspects to this. I think firstly, the success we've had obviously in getting to 48% renewable electricity has shown that there are established technologies out there, and as we try and tackle the challenges in heating and transport, there's a chance to deploy those technologies and others in doing that are already established. There are also new technologies coming through and a lot of really interesting things happening here. I mean, Mark's presentation showed some of the really interesting potential future developments in this space. So I think there's a range of potential technology solutions here. And one of the key issues then in the options consultation we will launch in March is getting input and feedback on which of the various different routes you think are the best way to proceed in each of those. I think there's also a question about how we join the system together better, because in the past we have traditionally looked at heat, power and transport. So the power is the renewable electricity figures I gave. The transport is basically petrol or diesel at the moment. and the heat is either natural gas, oil, or a bit of coal. But in the future, the energy system needs to be exactly that, a system which is joined up and where the success in one area can be used to meet a number of different energy needs. So I think ultimately the solution will be a mix of the technologies as well as how we use them, how we join together the systems, and how we just generally work smarter and more efficiently across that.
Thanks, Thomas. That probably actually leads into another question. I know I'm not allowing any of the other panelists to jump in here, but there was a question specifically for you, and then maybe I'll reach back out to the other panelists. There was an impressive graph in your presentation showing the evolution of the transition from, I think it was 3% renewables in 2005 to 48% now. What's the predicted trajectory of this graph, and what do you see as the main risks to delivery of further sustained transition?
Thanks, Sam. Yes, so obviously I sort of spelled out the real progress we've made on the renewable electricity side of things. So that'll be one of the things we consult on in the options paper is around the future trajectory of the renewable electricity side. Our minister has already stated that she doesn't want to see a target below 70% by 2030, which is an extremely ambitious target, as some of the issues around, for example, the electrification of heat and transport mean that the power sector isn't really there for the power sector anymore. It actually has a greater role to play in other sectors too. So almost the key question we have to look at in what a future target is 70, 80% of what? Because that will change as further things come on to use electricity. So yes, our minister stated that it'll be at least 70% by 2030, and we'll consult on that then in the options consultation that comes out. I mean, there are a number of different issues we want to look at in delivering on that. I think firstly, setting the target. I think the target itself has a really important role to play because it sends a clear signal on direction of travel to all the various stakeholders that need to take forward action here, whether that's in government, whether it's in industry, or whether it's in other bodies. Obviously, some of the things the Power Working Group will be looking at will be things such as how we support that through a revenue stability mechanism, contracts for difference in Great Britain. There's the Renewable Electricity Support Scheme coming in the Republic of Ireland. We have to look at the technology mix. We've traditionally had onshore wind driving that. Is that the same mix for the future? Do we bring in other technologies? And just more broadly at how renewables sit within the energy system and within society. Obviously how it fits within our natural environment, about where we locate projects in the future. So yeah, there's a number of things there to consider, but there's a clear trajectory there to grow this area in the future, and we look forward to getting inputs from the options consultation on what people feel is the best way to take forward.
Thanks, Thomas. So yes, encourage the audience here to participate in that again. Question for Tanya that's come in. Do feed-in tariffs for electricity have a place in encouraging micro-generation by domestic users?
Well, we already have a very large level and number of micro-generators out there. And I think it's worth mentioning that when people are generating electricity, as a regulator, we're not protecting them because we are protecting people who consume electricity. At this point in time, there is a tariff, which is an estimated tariff, a spill tariff, but everyone who has a small microgeneration is currently metered, and we're hoping to move to actually paying based on amount that is going onto the grid. In terms of whether they're going to add value in terms of encouraging them, I don't believe so. I cannot see people making a substantial money on this and it adding real value. I think there needs to be more incentive if we want people to have zero emission houses in the future. We need to be thinking about energy efficiency. We need to be thinking how that zero carbon house will work. I don't think just sticking a renewable generator on and then paying them money to go onto the grid is going to be the answer there.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to a question from Mark. He mentioned in the presentation about the investor landscape. I suppose it's really just, do you feel that there's a need to encourage more investors into the Northern Ireland energy landscape, Mark?
Yes, so I think particularly when you're looking at transformative technologies and bringing something new to the market, what we have found at Artemis sort of through a number of years of engagement has been that the VC community, the investor community is very active within the renewable sector. but their buckets of investment tend to be very focused. So if you bring something new in, it sits outside of those buckets, and it's really difficult to engage. And actually, this process takes quite a long time. So I think that bringing the investor community along the journey, particularly for new activity, is really critical. And I guess one thing I'm really keen to get across today, I think there's a real opportunity for Northern Ireland. We're a small country, but obviously there's an ability to demonstrate at scale, at a nation scale, in an achievable sort of size. And I think that's something that we really should make good use of. We've got all the infrastructure, all the connections, and certainly our experience of Artemis coming over from England in September has been, this level of engagement has been fantastic. The ability to come and do business, connect with companies of all sizes, and the research and technology organisations has made our life very easy. So I think there's a real opportunity in Northern Ireland, and again, it's making sure that investment is there to follow those ideas.
Thank you, Mark. That's excellent. And moving on to a question for Jan. It's a combination of two questions. Jan mentioned the R&D agenda. It was as much societal as technical. So where do you feel, Jan, you see the most need for R&D? And I suppose R&D is close to my own heart, to achieve the best net zero outcome. And I suppose it also aligns with the question we have here about, what are the main challenges for trialling innovative solutions?
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? Where's the R&D emphasis? I would always put the R&D emphasis on the institutional development and say that actually often I think our technological knowledge and expertise runs ahead of our ability to govern those technologies and systems, particularly when it comes to some quite demanding, innovative, socially as well as technically innovative changes around heat, which I talked a little bit about. I think for me, the R&D agenda in a technical sense for heat has to be determined by local or regional, and I'm thinking or country scale. So countries like Scotland and Northern Ireland, I think, are actually, I wouldn't say advantaged, but in a good position, just as Mark has been saying, in a good position to do that planning and decision making, because there is an established way of handling that and of managing it. An obvious area for improvements in technical development is around the area of heat pumps, for instance, at the moment. I'm thinking here of both ground source heat pumps, air source heat pumps, using heat storage systems, that thinking. Again, it's not necessarily at the cutting edge of technology, but these are technologies that really do need development. If you look at historically at a country like Denmark, Denmark in the first oil price crisis back in the 1970s was utterly dependent on imported oil for its heating systems. And what they did was say, we're in a crisis here, and maybe there's potential to learn from that, which was facing that crisis, albeit we're now facing, I would argue, a climate crisis as well as a pandemic. That is the point where those kind of cross-sector interests can be brought together moving forward. For heat, what happened in Denmark was that they centred their attentions on developing district heating systems and using waste heat. And we all generate enormous waste heat from industry, from, of course, data centres increasingly, from underground transport systems in London, for instance, interesting experiment using waste heat from the London Underground for heating networks. So that potential to hone those existing technologies and to develop ways forward through planned decision making and delegated authority is undoubtedly critical. And I've now forgotten the second bit of the question, but perhaps I've inadvertently touched.
It was about fighting innovation, Jan, and where the challenges might be.
Yeah. Oh, undoubtedly, the challenges are in where's the money come from? I've interviewed a number of local politicians in Scotland over the years, and a lot of those discussions say, well, yes, we would really, let me use Glasgow as an example. There was a sustainable Glasgow plan in place some years ago, interviewing Glasgow politicians about how that was going to be financed. They would talk about, well, ultimately it can, if we have to sing on the streets, it'll be down to singing on the streets. But clearly that's where a lot of the, again, the innovative thinking needs to come into play. How do we deploy the wealth that undoubtedly we have in Britain and in the UK? How do we deploy that wealth to make sure that we can make the sorts of systemic changes that are needed? How do we extract it from what it's currently locked into, largely fossil fuel systems, and turn that around in terms of the skills and jobs agenda that Nicola referred to benefit society and that socially just transition?
Thanks, Jan. No, that's excellent. Thank you. And I know we've been answering questions. Some more questions have come in, but unfortunately we've run out of time. So what we can commit to do is coming back to you individually, just with some responses. So thank you very much for your interaction. I think we managed to get one question in for each of the speakers there, except for Nicola, but apologies, Nicola. I'm going to hand directly over to Mark Welsh, just to, as Nicola mentioned, who's the Vice Chair of the Energy Institute Northern Ireland branch, just to say some final words.
Thank you, Sam. It's just really a closing remark just to thank everyone for joining our webinar this morning. And I just want to especially thank each of our speakers, John, Thomas, Tanya, Mark, Jan, Nicola and Sam. You have made a world-class webinar this morning. There are big challenges, and this morning we've looked at heat, we've looked at marine, and how the technology is there to deliver the solutions. But I think this morning demonstrated how we can all work together, from government through to education, through to industry, and how that we can make things work. So thank you again. The Energy Institute has a full range of training and development modules, and being part of the Energy Institute gives opportunities for networking, just like we have this morning. And so we'll encourage everyone just to think about joining and supporting the Institute as we aim to work all together to make sure we meet the challenge of net zero by 2050. Once again, thank you everyone for coming. And I'm just going to ask Nicola just to say a wee word to close the session. Thank you, Nicola.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. Very wise words. So I just want to again thank the Utility Regulator for helping put together this webinar, and for everyone attending today. I just want to thank you for actually attending, because I know it's very, very difficult at the moment. And, we just really appreciate you taking the time to join us. And we hope that you found some interesting ways of looking at how to reach net zero. And again, if we can support any of you through the Energy Institute, and you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to get in contact. But thank you again. Thank you to everyone, and have a great rest of your Wednesday. Take care. Bye.